Good evening. Welcome to the Kingsport Times-News Mayoral Candidate Forum. I'm Rick Thompson, publisher of the Times-News and your moderator for the evening. I'd like to thank the candidates for agreeing to participate in this forum, the Renaissance Center for hosting the event, Times-News reporter Matthew Lane for organizing, and all of you in attendance, whether in person or via our live stream at timesnews.net. I would ask you in the audience here if you would please mute your cell phones at this time. I'd like to introduce the candidates. On your left, Michael Lathrop, and on your right, Pat Schull. Brian Wolliver was slated to be with us tonight. Brian's unable to attend. He has a non-COVID related illness. He did want to be here. He responded early that he would be, but is unable to attend. The rules tonight. Each candidate will have 1 minute for an opening statement. Candidates will each have 90 seconds to answer each question. Candidates will have 1 minute for a closing statement. Billy Kirk, right here in the orange shirt, will be your timekeeper. He has a warning sign for 15 seconds and a stop for the time limit, and his phone beeps. With just 2 candidates present, we'll alternate the questions tonight. One, Mr. Lathrop will answer the first one first. Pat will answer the second one second. Thank you. Gentlemen, let's get started. Since Mr. Lathrop will be starting with the first question, we're going to let Mr. Schull go with his opening statement first.
Okay, well, thank you, Rick, and thank you for your all's continuing efforts to inform our public. Well, I'm your practical principled mayor, Pat Schull. I'm a Kingsport native. I'm a Dobbins-Bennett grad, a grad of the Citadel. I have a master's in public administration from the University of Tennessee. I was commissioned and second lieutenant out of the Citadel and spent many years in the Army, retired as a colonel, commanded at the company, battalion, and brigade level, served in key staff positions in the Pentagon, Germany, and Korea, attended the Army War College. When I retired and came home to Kingsport, I had 2 small businesses that I owned. I was a vice president for a college for a while, and I have almost 13 years as an elected official. And I would ask you to vote for me and let me continue the work that I've been doing with the BMA. I think that we're on target.
Hopefully that picked up. I will ask you to pick up your mics when you speak. I'm sorry. We'll do it. We're trying to get his attention. Mr. Lathrop.
All right, first of all, thanks to Times News for hosting this event, and best wishes to Brian for speedy recovery. I wish he could be here tonight, and I encourage everybody to go look at his social media and things that appear in the paper and catch his views as well, so you have an informed decision. I've been an entrepreneur, a small businessman. I moved to Kingsport 22 years ago. Prior to that, I had about 15 different addresses in my life. Kingsport's the first place that I truly felt in my head and my heart like I was home. It has a special meaning to me, not having that so much of my life. The world's changed a lot recently, and as we transition out of this pandemic, there is not going to be a magic reset button, so we need to make some changes to accommodate the future. I really think as you listen to my responses tonight, you'll understand that a whole lot better why. And all we can do is choose to prepare for the future and hope to get your vote in May. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Lathrop, first question for you. In your mind, what should be the city's top 3 priorities?
First and foremost, I think what we need to do is, again, be prepared for the changes ahead in the future and what's going to be the next normal as we transition out of what's been a very trying time. That includes really watching the wallet closely and spending our taxpayers' money with a renewed sense of stewardship. We certainly do need some infrastructure improvements, but I think we can do a far better job at utilizing past investments to make sure we're squeezing their full value out of things we've already invested in. Obviously, we have a homeless situation, and it's not unique to Kingsport, so we need to address that, in a compassionate yet fair and equitable way for everybody, get the people who want help the help they need. And lastly, I think we've got some housing issues that need to be addressed. We have a lot of blighted areas in town that are kind of a drain on not only social services, but our ability to prosper into the future. So that needs to be addressed. And obviously, there's a lot of people who are interested in moving to Kingsport. They need to be accommodated as well.
Thank you. Mr. Scholl.
Well, job one is good government. I mean, the city has to take care of its basic mission very well. That includes being fiscally disciplined, taking care of our infrastructure, having great schools, put our debt on the declining path, which it is right now. Number two priority would be economic development. We have to pay a lot of attention to that, and we have. We had successful agreements with Domtar and with Eastman. We've got over 300 new housing starts, either lots that have been identified or the actual houses being built right now. And quality of life. We have to maintain things like the Aquatic Center, Bays Mountain, the kind of amenities that the city offers that are different and unique and help attract people here. My concern is that the tone of a lot of these questions we've had at forums and in writing and so forth sort of indicate that the city should do more. Well, I believe in limited government, and it's a kind of a shaky path to go down if you're asking the city to do a lot more than its basic mission. It can entail a lot more expense and encroach upon your liberty, and I would never do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Scholl, you'll be first on this one.
Okay.
On any given day of the week, thousands of people come to Kingsport to work, yet these people don't live within city limits. What could or should Kingsport do to attract and retain these people?
Rick, I don't know if I agree with the premise. I mean, you all asked that in writing the other day. We had to respond to the Times News, and I know you'll publish it. But, you know, for all the people that travel to Kingsport to work and live elsewhere, we have a bunch that live in Kingsport and travel, you know, to Johnson City or Bristol. I don't really see this as a critical problem. I think the real issue is our declining birth rate. We have more deaths than we have births. Therefore, we need to bring more people here to live, and we're being pretty successful at that, attracting people. The Move to Kingsport effort, headed up by Jeff Fleming, our former city manager, is just doing great. Day before yesterday, I met a couple that was moving here from New Hampshire. I mean, people are, and I've been going door to door to several homes in our city, and I keep running into people that have lived here maybe 4 or 5 years, and they just love it here. They're great boosters of the city. The folks that have been other places, Mr. Lathrop's one of those people that used to live somewhere else and now found Kingsport and loves it here. And we're going to attract more and more of these remote workers who can work anywhere. And because of all the things we offer, like low cost of living, low taxes, and a very well-run city government.
Mr. Lathrop.
Sort of along the same vein of what Pat just said here, the premise of the question. I think rather than ask what we need to do to attract those people to move here, they're exposed to this town every day, 5 days a week when they come to work, if that's the numbers are accurate and that's what they're doing. Obviously, they're seeing things that are not attracting them enough in this city to make them want to move to Kingsport. Anybody who lives here, we know the amenities that we have available, and perhaps that's an area we need to focus on is, you know, as much as we want to reach out to people from other areas and get them interested in this area and moving here, the better we make the quality of life for our residents and get them actively involved in the path this city takes, the more they're going to be a champion for the city going forward and tell their relatives and coworkers, hey, why the heck ain't you living here? This is where you want to be. You know, all the reasons Pat mentioned, we've got so many great things in place. We're just not doing a good enough job, I think is what that indicates, that of letting people know who are right here coming to town every day don't know about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lathrop, you'll be first on this one. Sure. With the number of positive COVID-19 tests and hospitalizations again rising at an alarming rate across the region, what can or should the city government do, or what could or should the mayor do to turn this trend locally?
We're obviously made some improvements in there. I don't feel like it's the onus of a local government to try and enact any further legislation or put any additional restrictions on our local businesses. The best thing we can do is set a good example. Certainly encourage everybody and individuals, businesses alike to follow CDC guidelines and follow the science. Additionally, we're going to transition out of this, obviously, and it's a shame we've got what we have going on, but I think, anything that the city's considering, and it's a problem. We saw it today, Ballot is saying we can't really handle much more than we're doing with COVID right now. So again, setting a good example for the people by lead the way you want to act and treat others the way you want to be treated. I think it's kind of more of a national problem than a local one, so a little bit of that is out of our hands. So I think, again, the best thing we can do is set a good example for others.
Good, thank you. Mr. Schultz.
Well, this is a once-in-a-100-year thing that happens, a pandemic. In fact, the first mayor of Kingsport was mayor during the Spanish flu. And I've been totally involved in this, both from the governmental aspect and from the aspect of being a community leader. First, because we didn't know the effect it was going to have on the city government and the finances, we passed a very conservative budget. We cut back on our spending. We put our debt on a declining rate. We didn't raise taxes. We didn't raise any fees, water or sewer. We were very conservative, and it turned out to be a wise decision. And then as a community leader, I've been involved with the Economic Recovery Group, headed up by the state, but the 6 counties that have their own health department, including Sullivan. We participated daily at one time, and now it's, it got weekly and then, about once a month now. But I've been advocating at the appropriate time to reopen our businesses, but at the same time, I've urged our citizens to be careful, to wear masks, when they're in public, be at a grocery store or wherever. And I think we've handled it just right. You can look at some of the northern states or at California, how buttoned down they were, that it harmed the economy. And so we were trying to hit the right balance between keeping a healthy economy and not jeopardizing our citizens' health.
Mr. Lathrop. Oh, you already answered it. I'm sorry. We'll go to question 4. Mr. Schultz, you'll be first on this one. In the recent past, city and elected leaders have discussed a so-called magnet project for downtown, and at one point considered a large multi-purpose facility for the Brickyard Park. What type of magnet project, if any, should Kingsport be pursuing?
Again, you'll read my answer in the Times News because y'all asked that question, but first, I'm a little leery of a kind of a quick fix, which a magnet project could very well be. I mean, it's one thing for private enterprise to spend their own money in some kind of investment or business venture. It's another thing for me to risk taxpayer money. Now, Rick alluded to the project that was being considered before I became mayor, which I campaigned against, and that was to have another baseball stadium in what we now call the Brickyard Park. But instead, we've taken that Brickyard Park and we've opened it up for development. We've got the Miracle Park in there for handicapped children and the wounded warriors to play ball. There's nothing like it in a 200-mile radius. So we've got housing there. We're going to have a big area where we can have outdoor concerts. One end, we're going to have the new skate park and a new bicycle trump park. We sold the property of the city owned along Main Street. And we know we got a business already moving in from Virginia, bringing jobs here. And so we see that this is going to be a boost to the downtown, which is already getting a lot of interest. If you looked at the old Bell Telephone building, that's being developed into condos, and they look great, and they've already sold several of them. So we're moving in the right direction.
Mr. Latham.
As far as a magnet project, at this time, I really don't think it's prudent for the city to pursue that. We're looking at, again, changes coming our way, and whatever this next normal is, that's where we need to focus. You know, there's more than a hint of inflation in the air floating around, and that could catch us off guard. There's also, we have rental eviction moratoriums about to expire, and we have some infrastructure that needs some attention. I think by addressing those problems well and being very transparent with as far as what we're addressing and why we're doing it, the magnet is going to become the improvements we made in our city.
Thank you. You'll be first up on question 5. Kingsport has a good business base downtown, good solid base, but there's room for improvement. What can the city do to entice downtown growth?
I'm going to broaden that question just a little bit. This is the city of Kingsport. It's not just downtown Kingsport. We have large business developments all throughout. There's a lot that have come into the folds of the city through Colonial Heights and all the Stone Drive businesses. They've suffered through some very difficult, trying times with great tenacity and innovation. And some of them have fared better than others, and others are unfortunately gone forever. What we do for business going forward needs to be fair and equitable for everybody to get them through this, first by encouraging everybody to shop local. I mean, it's great to have downtown as a center attraction. We've got DKA, and again, other things we've already done to enhance that and support downtown. So let them continue those efforts, but any business efforts we make as a city have to be made across the entire city. I don't think it's fair to the other businesses to focus on one particular area.
Mr. Scholl.
Well, there's a famous futurist who specializes in municipal type issues, Richard Florida, who points out that the downtown is the heart of a city, and even if you're considering putting a new business somewhere on the periphery of the city or a different area than the downtown, they won't be attracted to come if you have a crummy downtown. And our downtown's getting better every day. As I pointed out, it's right adjacent to the Brickyard Park and all the development that's going on there. And also the downtown is in a tax-advantaged opportunity zone and redevelopment zone, which means in simple terms, it's very attractive to investors to invest there because they'll get better return on their money if the basic project that they pursue is successful. So we work hand in hand with Kingsport Economic Development Board. They provided several facade grants, which makes the downtown look better. We've got about 12 new businesses that opened up over the last year, even during the pandemic, downtown. And the Chamber of Commerce has put out that list. You can go to their website and you can see the new businesses. So we're moving more and more toward sort of like what they do in Europe. They have a business down on the first floor and they live up on the second floor. And that's a good thing. It'll just build on itself, and the downtown will be even more vibrant.
Thank you. Mr. Scholl, you'll be first up on question 6. What should the city of Kingsport's role be in addressing the homeless situation in town?
Okay, well, yeah, I've heard a lot of the candidates, aldermen, mayor, whatever, talk about this question, and nobody's brought up the other side of the coin. The other side of the coin is, downtown business people have come to me and said they're not too crazy about coming to their business in the morning and walking across their parking lot, stepping on needles, or finding where somebody defecated on their stoop. And the people who live near Hunger First in that neighborhood, they're very unhappy about the people that wandered through there and go into their garage or try to get in their house or take things. Now, the city has done more in the last 2 years than it's ever done before. We hired a social worker who works with the police department, and she's been very successful in getting people on the right path. And the good news is there's lots of services available to people that want to get better. The real crux of the problem is the mentally ill and drug-addicted people. And I've asked the governor, the state legislators for help in that area, and I think they will help. I think maybe you'll eventually see a state-run mental health hospital with a drug treatment wing somewhere reasonably close to the Tri-Cities, because the city and the county do not have the resources to deal with that problem, and I adamantly oppose a tax increase to support this area that can be better addressed by the current social services and the private sector.
Mr. Latham.
Kind of echoing a little of what Pat said, we have this tremendous ecosystem of facilities, charities, and organizations within Kingsport who all fundamentally want the same thing, and I think you'll hear it out of all the candidates as well, and I'm sure all of our residents want the same thing. This needs to be addressed, and they need help. But the reality is that's not the sort of project that, with a clear conscience, that the city can provide funding for. The reality is any project of this scope, and it's increasing, and very honestly probably going to increase more before it gets better. So it comes down to needing funding. I brought this up before, so I'm looking for ways to make an alternative option for that, to get them that funding. I'd like to see us look at the possibility of initiating a small property tax break in exchange for donations that residents make to any of these charities that are providing services to those. I think any loss in revenue we see as a result of giving that property tax break will more than see back in savings from the cost of providing social services and emergency services on the scale we have now.
Thank you. Mr. Lathrop, you'll be first for question 7. Should Kingsport move its municipal election date to correspond with a national primary or national election? Why or why not?
Absolutely. I presume a little bit of the reason that it's in place is somebody along the way as we make that transition gets a longer or a shorter term. The reality is Bristol went ahead and did it, and Blundfeld, Bluff City moved it. We're the only one who still has this individual election. It costs the city $35,000 to hold this, and it's got notoriously low voter turnout. Obviously, by combining the election date, we're going to have better voter turnout, and we'll save the city $35,000 that we spend every 2 years very needlessly.
Thank you. Mr. Schultz.
Well, first, the BMA already voted on it. It was 3-4 vote. I was on the losing end. I voted to change. But I voted to change because I knew that the provision of this particular law was such that we could change back to the way we do it now if we didn't like it, without having to go to the state legislature to ask for a private act or anything. That was already provided for. So my rationale was simply that if you combined our election time with either state or national, August or November of an even year, we would have a greater turnout. Now, the other BMA members, and I respect their opinion on this, they felt like leaving it where it is in the odd year in May, that the most committed, interested, informed voters would turn out to decide the election. And when you have a low turnout, you know, your vote is critically important. And, you know, city elections, out of 33,000 registered voters in Kingsport, we're lucky if we'll get 6,000 plus. You know, we've had several years where we're lower than that. And, you know, I want people to turn out, but I can see where my colleagues want people to turn out who are informed. And again, I appreciate what the Times News is doing to help people become informed about the issues involved in municipal government.
All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Schultz, you'll be first up on question 8. Should our aldermen be elected at large? Why or why not?
Well, our aldermen are elected at large. So I guess the thrust of the question is, should we have districts? Now, districts is not an unusual thing. Bristol has districts. They have a combination of, Bristol, Tennessee, they have a combination of a few of their commissioners elected at large, and then I think they have 3 districts. I would be willing to consider it, certainly. I mean, I could envision, now remember, Kingsport's 53 square miles now, and our population's 53,000, and I think when the census pops out, you know, all the results, we're going to have grown in population. So I could easily envision 4 aldermen elected from 4 districts and 2 aldermen elected at large and the mayor elected at large. We're not quite at that size where it's as critical as it would be maybe in a larger city, but I think it's worth considering.
Mr. Latham.
Difficult question for a number of reasons. You know, we've got a lot of things we need to address in the city. Obviously, the way we're currently set up, and as Pat alluded to earlier, the dedicated voters in this election tend to come from a very confined economical and geological region of the city. So there's something to be said about having a more fair and equitable representation of all of our citizens in the Board of Aldermen. However, to do it fairly and equitably going forward, there's a lot of technicalities that have to be addressed. I don't think it's bad what we have. You know, we've got a big advantage over cities that have a strong mayor or simply a city manager, in so much that we have the advantage of having a good bit of check and balances. Could it be better? Probably. But I think we've got a few more pressing things on the plate before we put too much effort into addressing just that.
Thank you. Mr. Lathrop, you'll be up first for question 9. Where should Kingsport build its next city park and why?
We're going to see some changes, and I think there's going to have to be some changes, particularly in the Highland and Lynn Garden areas going forward. Even the new development going in the Westgate property is going to be disproportionate in its look and feel to its surrounding neighbors. So as these neighborhoods change and evolve, I think not so much a buffer zone, but that seems like a logical place if we're going to go putting in parks. I'll go right back to, is this really the time in the moment that we need to be looking at doing additional parks? Yes, quality of life is very important, but man, we've got a lot of good facilities here. If something is needed and the area demands it, absolutely, we can look at it, but let's work with what we got a little bit first.
Mr. Shore.
I guess if you had aldermen elected by district, they'd be fighting for a park. But we recently got a great brief from our Director of Parks and Recreation, Kitty Frazier, on the master plan we recently developed for Parks and Rec. And in that plan, they envisioned that there was a consultant we hired that helped us with it, and the BMA reviewed it. And there's one of the definite recommendations was to extend city parks to various neighborhoods. Again, when you're 53 square miles, which is pretty big for our size population, there's neighborhoods that would need a park. Where the next one goes, we didn't actually hash that out, but eventually we're going to have to hash it out because the need is firmly established. And of course, the Parks and Recreation Plan, I mean, if I had $1 bazillion, I guess I'd implement it all, you know, as soon as possible. But we really have to figure out how we can do it in a smooth, coordinated way over time, in an affordable manner, to make sure that we do this, but also balance off our spending in other areas, be it continue the increase in paving, which we've done recently, and city requirements.
Thank you. Mr. Shule, you'll be first on question 10. Regionalism means different things to different people. What is your view of the specific regionalism efforts that have gained some steam over the last few years? Is it worth it or a waste of time?
Well, I participate in all the regionalism discussions. I mean, I guess I almost came in sort of that the movie had already started when I became mayor on July 1st, and the pandemic truly interrupted this process. But first, I think Vice Mayor George made a really good point last night that we already do regionalism every day. I sit on 9 different panels that the scope is greater than just Kingsport, ranging from the Upper East Tennessee Human Development Agency, UEFTA, to the First Tennessee Development District, to the Holston Business Incubator. I mean, we're doing regionalism every day, and we have a lot of cooperative agreements. But I guess the real thrust of the question is, are we going to eventually move to a regional economic development directorate? Now, you know, we participate in networks, and all the BMA members are happy with networks. But I think the answer is yes. The progress toward that got interrupted, but I think eventually we're going to have a regional economic development entity, and there's a simple reason for it. There's strength in numbers. You know, if you have the 8-county area that's covered in the First Tennessee Development District, you got more clout in Nashville and nationwide than if you got each city going off it alone. We'll always be Kingsport first, the BMA members, but there is a role for an economic development body.
Mr. Lathrop.
Okay, as far as regionalism, echoing Pat once again, obviously it does give us some clout when we participate in that. And obviously we have a lot of stuff in place, and we have investment not only financially but manpower in a lot of these organizations that are out there on a regional level. Obviously they provide some value. I think you know, the prudent thing is, as new opportunities and come our way, we need to very carefully look at each one individually, weigh its merits, our potential costs and benefits, and address each one separately. To put a blanket statement over regionalism isn't fair. You can be darn sure Johnson City and Bristol and Bluff City and everybody else around here has their local governments. We have to look out for our hometown. That's our primary job as an elected official, is looking out for that. Sometimes that's going to involve a situation that needs regional cooperation. Sometimes we might want to take a wait-and-see attitude on some of these things. But again, let's address each one as it comes up and do what's best for the city.
Mr. Lathrop, you'll be first up on question 11. How should Kingsport approach economic development? What types of incentives do you think Kingsport should be using to improve its economic situation?
Again, we have the other thing we're blessed with here in town is we've made a lot of great investments in business development. You go down around the corridor there where Inventor Center is, and ThinkSpace and Excel, and I can go on. There's all these entities down there that are perfect for somebody who wants to start a business. I think what we need to do is focus on utilizing those existing things, tying in our education to that same kind of incubator for new business and entrepreneurship in the area. And by doing that, we can make sure we're getting kids in school and college the right kind of education to support what's coming our way in the future, get them interested in staying around because they're going to see new and innovative businesses coming to town. So we really need to focus on high tech and whatnot. I just read a thing with Tennessee. We're like 40th in the country right now on tech savvy workforce availability. So, but we're way higher than that in infrastructure. We're like 20th. So it tells us we have a lack of education. So let's tie the education folks into our business development and kind of get more circular on that, and again, maximize our investment.
Thank you. Mr. Schull, you'll be first up.
Well,
Oh, I'm sorry.
again, it's
Go
on
ahead.
economic development, right?
Yes, go
Okay. Well, again, it's possible to have expectations that are unrealistic about what the city should do. You know, the city should use your taxpayer dollars to accomplish the service mission that we have. Now, a big chunk of that, of course, is the school system, and we have to have great schools to attract people here and businesses. We also put an emphasis in the schooling on the workforce development piece, particularly the career technical education. And then if you have a well-run city, good finances, low debt, and declining debt in this case, that is attractive to people. But economic development is not easy. You know, I've been going door to door, and I get economic development questions. People ask me, you know, why don't we have a Red Lobster or this, that, and the other thing? And I mean, there's reasons behind all this, but we do work on retail recruiting. We have an economic development director in the city. We've worked with Buxton, a analytical agency that helps us attract and bring to the attention outside businesses the possibility of coming to Kingsport. But people are finding us because we're such a great place to live with all the amenities we have, low cost of living, well-run city government. I see bright things happening.
Thank you. You'll be first up on question 12,
Okay.
Mr. Schull. The George L. Carter Railroad Museum at ETSU is looking for a new home. Is Kingsport a good place for that?
Well, your editorial said it was. You know, my grandfather was a railroader, lifelong, started at 12 years old, callboy, and was one of the original executives in the Clinchfield Railroad when it was established in Irwin. But all my study indicates that local museums don't make money. You know, big museums like the Smithsonian and those kind of places, I mean, they get a lot of people visiting. But so if you're going to have a successful local museum, you need a lot of volunteers and you need some private investment. I would not take this on as a city mission solely, that the city would spend, you know, pay the whole freight for a museum like this. I mean, in the past, we've kicked around the idea of having an industrial museum because we are a manufacturing city and so forth. But I don't want to do anything that's going to be a loss in taxpayer revenue to our citizens. That wouldn't be fair. But the city can help get behind this if there's a lot of private interest and volunteers and people that want to step up and help. But I'm very careful about what we commit city taxpayer dollars toward, and first job is toward our basic mission.
Thank you. Mr. Latham.
I think one of the things we can do best in a city of this size as a elected official is treat our hometown the way we treat our home. In times we've been through and in times we're going through, if we poll the people in our house and hey, what do we really want? We all want a new pool. Cool. It's pretty easy to get everybody in the house to agree it'd be great to have a new pool. But if you're sitting here at this moment in time and the roof's leaking and the kids need glasses, it's probably not the moment to write a check to put that new pool in the backyard. And that's how we kind of need to look at our city funds right now, at least for the near term, until we have a better idea of how things are playing out. I mean, as far as morally supporting and hooking up, you know, the people with the museum to folks who may be of that philosophical nature to want to help that out by donations, I would love to see it here. Obviously, it'd be good for the community, but to fund that at this time, just don't see it as the best thing. We got to get the kids some glasses and fix the leaking roof first.
Thank you. Question 13, Mr. Lathrop, you'll be up first. Should Kingsport help fund a skimmer boat for the Boone Lake cleanup?
I went back and forth on this a little bit, and initially my thought was no, but I kind of changed my mind to yes, because the waterways around here are a big attraction to the area, and we all collectively benefit. The other thing is, just out of compassion, even though that money is being used completely outside of the city limits, let's have some compassion for our neighbors. There's a lot of folks who depended on that lake who've had a hard time and then get thrown a pandemic on top of it. Bottom line is what they're asking for is a tremendously small sum, way less than our May election is going to cost, to put it in perspective. So I think it would be a good regionalism thing, a good neighbor policy to go ahead and participate in that.
Mr. Schultz.
Absolutely, I agree with the editorial you all wrote, and I'm going to bring it to a vote. Here's where we stand right now. We have our city attorney doing all the research, dotting the i's, crossing the t's, to make sure that we could legally commit city money, your taxpayer money, toward the Boone Lake Association, a private association, and not get scorched by the state comptroller because we spent money, improperly. So obviously whatever I do, I want to do legally, but let's assume for the sake of this discussion, it is legal. Absolutely. We're not even in TVA's district. We have American Electric Power, which makes us unique compared to all our neighbors around here in Upper East Tennessee. But TVA has given us over $800,000 in impact payments because of the problem with the dam. So we wouldn't give them $31,250 to the Boone Lake Association. We'd look chintzy if we didn't do that. We talk about being a regional cooperation and being, cooperative regionally. And I'm all for this. And yes, it doesn't touch Kingsport. That's true. But do we get benefit of it? Jeff Fleming, when he sells Move to Kingsport and all the great things about this, he says we got 2 lakes that are reasonably close, and you can so forth, so on. This is a way to show that we definitely are a regional player, and it's a good thing.
Thank you. Mr. Shaw, you'll be first up on question 14. I want you to look out 25 years in the future. What's your one big wish for Kingsport?
Well, that's a good question. I hope that my kids come back to Kingsport to live. They'll probably be off somewhere for several years. But for Kingsport, that we just keep growing, that we never lose our hometown feel, that people care about each other. We talked about the homeless. Listen, Kingsport gives more money to United Way and other charities in proportion to our population than the other cities in the Tri-Cities. It's just true. We care about each other. We take care of each other. People love here. The new people who come here from like New York, where if you get a wave, it's probably with one finger. Here you get a real wave because people are friendly and they like you and they'll engage and they'll talk, and it's just such a welcoming place. And I think I just want to see that the Kingsport spirit just continue on for the next 25 years.
Thank you. Mr. Latham.
What I would really like to see 25 years from now is a town that has a lot of the kids right now who are high school age graduating right now. In 25 years, I want them to have never left Kingsport, be putting their kids into the school system, and some of those are even going to be in high school themselves. But I've seen and heard so many times, and it breaks my heart, that high school age kids in Kingsport, one of their largest aspirations upon graduation seems to be to leave. We need to fix that and start working very hard and make this not only a town we're proud of and happy for ourselves, but make it the crown jewel of the Tri-Cities 25 years from now, and a place that we're proud on our decisions we make today to leave the kind of legacy to make our children and our children's children be proud and want to stay in this city.
Thank you. Mr. Lathrop, you'll be first up on question 15. What partnerships should the city engage in or strengthen to give it a brighter future?
Again, case-by-case basis, and in 90 seconds, it's hard to go down the list. Obviously, we have quite a few that are working well, and I'd like to focus on certainly anything to do with business development and bringing in the kind of jobs and businesses we need in this town to be prepared for the future. The face of retail is going to change. We have to fill that gap. It would be nice if we had a magic reset and everything when we get out of this pandemic. We could go back to the way it was in 2019, but the reality is that's not going to happen. We know it in our hearts. So what we have to do now is make some hard changes. We changed and we learned to change this past couple of years, not because we wanted to, but because we had to. But out of that, we also learned that change can sometimes bring some good things. We learned how to do things differently. We learned how to educate differently. We learned how to shop differently. And out of those, some things we tried, and hey, it's not so bad. I know a lot of folks that swore they'd never order anything online, and all of a sudden, hey, it's pretty cool, and I can sit here in my pajamas, click a few buttons, and I don't have to go out in the rain to get my dog food and something else. So, yeah, let's kind of adapt with that in mind.
Mr. Schul.
Well, we have great, vibrant partnerships right now in existence between the city and other entities. The Chamber of Commerce. Chamber of Commerce puts on a great Fun Fest every year. Yes, last year was an exception, that once every 100-year pandemic. But, and of course, they couldn't do it without the city assistance. We have great partnerships with our local businesses, be it Eastman or Domtar or the ammunition plant or Ballard. You know, we get along pretty well with those. We approach like the pandemic. We've worked very closely with both the Sullivan County Health Department and the Ballard, and a partnership with the county has improved. You know, Mayor Venable and I have good personal relations, and we, you know, we talk back and forth with the county. United Way, we have great. In fact, once a month. United Way is kind of convenes what they call a community partners meeting, and several people representing folks like the Chamber, the Aquatic Center, the YMCA, the city, of course, the KHRA, Kingsport Housing Redevelopment Authority. I mean, we have great partnerships now that we just need to continue and foster and keep up what we're doing.
Thank you. Mr. Schul, last question, you'll be first. Should annexation by ordinance be brought back?
Well, you know, I was an alderman from 2005 to 2009, and I voted on a few annexations, and the annexations picked up after I left the board. You know, Matthew probably can give you this date and location of all of them. There was a period in there from 2010, 11, or so forth, 12, where they did a lot of annexation, maybe too aggressively, but we have what we have. There's pros and cons for annexation. But we have annexed out as far as our natural growth has taken us. There's no need to, even if we had the flexibility to annex more, there's no need to annex any further out than what we've done right now. And there's a lot of places where we can infill for housing, which is what we're doing right now. So of that 53 square miles of our city, we still got places where we can put more people, and that's we certainly have the infrastructure to accommodate that. We have an outstanding infrastructure. I mean, we could expand sewer and water easily if we had to. But I don't see any need to actually expand and annex any further in the limits of our city now, and we'll see what the state decides down the road if they want to change the laws.
Mr. Latham.
I have a perspective on this, as I was involved in one of the annexations, and that's how I became a city resident rather than a county resident about 7 years ago. I'll tell you something. When I first went through that, I wasn't a fan. I bought out where I thought I was annex-proofed when I bought that house in 1999. And what seemed like a blink of an eye later, all of a sudden, yeah, I spent 6 months with the city limit on one of my property lines. And I was quite happy and content at that time being a county resident. Certainly went to the local meetings that the city held there and heard an array of promises and good things that would happen. I'm not going to armchair quarterback the decisions. I'm okay with being a city resident. I'm quite happy with it, actually. But I did feel deceived and lied to in a lot of ways, too, to be very honest about it. Do we need more annexation? Probably not. There may be a couple areas on the map, if we look at it, that just make good financial sense to do, to fill in a few blanks, since we already have to provide police, fire, et cetera, out in those areas. But I think we're pretty okay with the size we are for a while.
Good. Thank you, gentlemen. That was 16 questions. You guys went so quick, I had to write 3 down real quick. So those last 3 were completely off the top of my head. We said we would give you a minute. We've got time to give you a couple of minutes for your closing statements. So, Mr. Lathrop, you're up first.
Okay, since I got a couple minutes, I'll finish off the thoughts I started my opening with as far as change in the future. Sometimes these changes can be good. And as I said, we can take some good lessons we learned out of there and find the silver linings out of what we've lived through recently. I read a study here the last couple nights, and they were surveying a lot of big businesses who had remote workers. And I was a remote worker in 1999. Nobody knew what a remote worker was then, and a lot of people who are now didn't know what one was a year and a half ago. But on a national level, you're looking at probably 1 in 4 people who had to remote work will remain remote working. It makes good sense for a lot of businesses to do that rather than have the office space. Some of them still want some interaction with employees, so some of the bigger companies are starting smaller regional things where they can do an alternating schedule and get employees together, so we can look into bringing some of that into town. But here's what it comes down to. We have a choice. We can either prepare for the future, or we can do the same things we've always done and hope everything's going to be okay. I don't believe that's a realistic choice. So we need to find these little silver linings out there, prepare this town to be, as I said earlier, something our children and grandchildren will love and cherish what we did, because we made the right decisions now for what's coming in the future. The other thing I think we need is a very proactive government going forward as far as communications with the people, to give them invested interest and embrace feedback from folks. Seek it out, not do the absolute minimum we need to, and make sure the residents know that they not only have a voice, but it's listened to and appreciated, and make them feel no animosity towards the city government, but feel like they're involved in it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Schull.
2 years ago, I said there were some things I wanted to do. I said we need to do better in paving. We doubled the budget. We've paved 30% more mileage than we did before. I said I was going to keep a sharp eye on spending. We've reduced spending. We've reduced debt. We didn't raise taxes. I said that we wanted to communicate with people. So I started having town halls, just like I said I would, and ran into a pandemic, and I didn't want to be accused of being a super spreader. So instead, I started having small group meetings, but I've had several of them. Plus, I send out an email. Probably there's 5,000 citizens that get an email from me once a week. I know Rick gets one, and Matthew gets one, in which I try to keep the citizens informed. I'm totally accessible to citizens. You wouldn't believe the number of phone calls, emails, and personal visits I get by citizens. So I do communicate. And finally, I'd point out that there's some things that you can predict are going to happen. Every year, you're going to pass a budget. You're going to set a tax rate. You're going to do certain things. But the other thing you can predict is that there will be things that you had no way of knowing are going to happen. Who knew there was going to be a pandemic? As I've gone door to door to door this year, like I did 2 years ago, people have thanked me for my leadership. And it's very humbling, you know, I mean, but I feel like I was the right person at the right time in the right place. And I'm going to keep doing what I've always said I'd do, be a fiscal conservative, watch your money, be careful with it, make good decisions like we did at Brickyard Park, not do dumb things. And the mayor only gets a 2-year term. You notice that the aldermen get 4-year terms. I'd really like 2 more years to keep doing this, so I'd appreciate it if you'd vote for me. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you.
If
It's-
we've got plenty of time, would they be willing to take a question? Would they be willing to just hear a comment from the audience?
Gentlemen?
That's what I do. I listen to citizens every day.
Okay, I don't have, whoever, anybody that wants to can answer this. I'm not addressing this question to anybody in specific. I am reasonably new to the area. I've been here about a year and a half. I went down and I looked at Hunger First, and I don't live nearby, but overall, I was impressed with the organization. I was impressed with Mike Gillis, and what he's doing with what he's got to work with. And overall, I thought the inside was fairly clean. Now, I understand I understand the problems with the homeless, based on Mike Gillis' standpoint, and also based on the neighbors. But it seems to me that there would be some small things that could be done to accommodate, make things a little bit better for the homeless. Now, I might not understand exactly what's involved, but like during the cold weather, I understand that Mike Gillis, the Salvation Army, they wanted to let people sleep there, and they wanted to let people shower there. And it was either against building codes, or maybe it was the fire marshal that said it couldn't be done. It seems to me there's little things that can be done to make exceptions to specific organizations like the Salvation Army, and Hunger First, and even Home of Grace. That's what I've got to say. And again, I might not completely understand the problem, but I think little things could be done to better bring peace between the homeless and the residents. Comments, gentlemen?
Mr. Lathrop, you answered you would be next to answer questions, so.
Okay. As far as what
Please pick up
happened
your
in the
mic.
wintertime, yeah, a lot of that had to do with the codes and the facility as it was. It's just bottom line, not a safe situation. The compassionate side of me very much wants to make an exception. But as a city official, I also have to look out for our citizens at large. And part of the reason we have codes is to keep our residents safe. So to make that exception puts us in a potential liability situation. So that needs to be addressed. Is it the most fair and compassionate? Could we look the other way? Would nothing happen? Would everybody get through the night? Probably. But what if it doesn't?
Who's going to sue the homeless? I mean,
It-
it's better than freezing out on the street. I'm sorry.
I don't deny that, and that's why this is a very complex and in-depth situation. I can't speak to all the decisions that were made internally at that particular time. Perhaps Pat can. You know, and at the same time, I've got to feel compassion for the folks around there who are concerned about the optic of the immediate vicinity of there because of the number of people who hang around during the day. And it's tragic we have that. Not that they're hanging around, but just the fact we have that many people that are in need of food that they're waiting on their next meal there. So by having a good, sound policy going forward, that's the best thing we can do. We obviously need some more shelter spots for people so we don't have situations like that in the future. I can't change what's already been done and what's already happened, but I'll do my best to do everything I can to do a fair, equitable, compassionate solution for these kind of things going forward.
Mr. Scholl, I'll let you have a comment if you'd like, and then we'll wrap this up.
I have to be pretty careful what I say about Hunger First. We've had legal situations. Let me say there are very responsibly run organizations in our city that do a good job with the homeless. You mentioned one, Salvation Army. If a individual needs an overnight shelter, first the shelter has to be in an area that's zoned for that type of activity. Secondly, shelters require that people follow rules. You can't go in there and start beating up the buddy in the bunk next to you. You can't be using drugs. You know, there has to be some structure imposed. The Salvation Army, to make it short, they kind of impose tough love. But, you know, I'm charged to look at this from all angles. And I get far more complaints about Hunger First than I get people supporting Hunger First. And listen, every dollar I've ever earned as an elected official in almost 13 years, I've given to charity. So I don't need to be lectured about lack of compassion and all that. I just want to have people who are responsible and doing the right thing to be involved in this kind of work. And we do have a homeless coalition, and under that is a group, there's several groups under this coalition. It truly is a coalition. One of them's Homeless Ministries, Inc., who I see that in the not too distant future will probably open up a day center / overnight shelter. And the people, and I know these people, and I trust that they'll run it responsibly. But let me end by saying this. I don't want to see this thing get stood up, and then 2 or 3 years from now, they say, we're out of money, city, bail us out. That's not our mission. The city does not have a social services mission. We employed a social worker who's assigned to the police department because our interaction with homeless was through criminal activity. We don't arrest people for being homeless. We arrest them for committing crimes. Well, I'll end with one other story. I had just been elected mayor. I hadn't even taken office yet, but I went to see the police chief, and I asked him about this. He said, well, let me give you an example, Colonel. I'm retired Army, he calls me Colonel. But he said, we arrested a couple guys the other day, and first we confiscated their cell phone. I said, stop right there, Chief. How do they get cell phones? Well, they get free cell phones from the federal government, ostensibly for a good reason, so they can find work. I said, okay, well, continue with your story, Chief. He said, well, we asked them where they're from. They're from Colorado. Well, what are you doing here? We heard it was a good place to live, or be, a good place to be. If you economists say that if you subsidize something, you will get more of it. So my job is to balance compassion with the needs of our citizens, our tax-paying, productive citizens.
Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you for answering all those questions, for entertaining one more from the audience. Another thanks to the Renaissance Center staff for hosting us, and Matthew Lane for setting this up, and everybody in attendance, either in person or on our live stream. That will conclude our candidate forums for this election year. Thank you.
Thank you.